So, like I said, welcome to the actual UCLA Teaching Kitchen. I'm really happy to be back on campus today. Hopefully we'll be able to start doing this a little bit more regularly, at least for me to be able to be in here and show off our awesome space. But it's still gonna take some getting used to for me. I haven't filmed in here yet. You know, I am figuring it out. So bear with me. Like I said, if there's any issues, let me know. I think that the microphone on this camera is maybe a little bit less sensitive, so I'm going to try to remember to direct myself right at you, but if I need to repeat myself, just let me know. I'm really excited to make this recipe today. This is one of my favorite kind of summer classic treats. Whoopie pies are an old-timey tradition. Filled sandwich cookies, but the cookies are more like cakes, so that's a whoopie pie, but often they're made with vanilla or chocolate cake and basic fillings. We are making a lemon blueberry whoopie pie today, two of my favorite summer seasonal fruits, and I thought that this would be a really fun thing to have as a treat in the middle of this excruciatingly hot week we're having. So to get going on that, you want to make sure that your oven is preheated to 350. And you've got some baking sheets ready to go. If you have a big one, then one is probably enough, but maybe two of the half-size baking sheets, because this makes, it makes a dozen whoopie pies, which means it makes 24 of those cookies. You could divide it if you wanted to make fewer than that. You would just have to beat your one egg together and then split the egg in half to make half of a recipe. But you could absolutely do that. Or you can make them and then they stay in the fridge pretty well for a really long time. Or you can make the cake batter, the like whoopie pie batter, and then bake those off and freeze them. And then you can fill them and serve them, you know, a week from now or something, and they'll still be good. So you would be freezing them as the separate little cake cookie things, not as the filled whoopie pie, if that makes sense. So there's lots of different ways you could do this if you wanted to not have a whole dozen whoopie pies, but friends and neighbors love these kinds of treats, so it's great to share. So make sure your oven is on, you've got your baking pans ready to go. We're gonna be doing the creaming method, which we did with it's the basic cookie method. So we're gonna be putting our butter and sugar into a mixer. If you don't have a mixer, you can absolutely do this in a food processor, or you can do it by hand. Just make sure that your butter is nice and soft, and you're using a good stiff spoon or wooden spatula so that you can really kind of beat it. You want to create aeration and break down the butter and really dissolve the sugar into the creaming mixture. So you can do it in a lot of different ways. I'm going to be using the KitchenAid because back in our awesome state-of-the-art kitchen, I'm going to use some awesome state-of-the-art equipment. Lucky me. But we baked last time without the mixer, and it's absolutely doable. So this doesn't have to, you're not trying to make a whipped cream by hand. You're just going to cream your sugar and butter together. We're dealing with half a cup of butter. That's one stick. And, well, is that correct? Then half a cup of sugar. So you want to get that into your mixer or whatever bowl you're using with the paddle attachment, not the whisk attachment. And then you're going to let it go. You want to cream it until it's really nice and fluffy. And if you're doing it by hand, you want to switch arms. Make sure you get your workout on both sides today. But as long as you, so when we first put it in, it's going to be one color. And then when we're done, it's going to be a different color. It's going to be pale and fluffy. So that's what we're looking for, whichever way you're mixing this. Bring this up. I think you can see that in there. Yeah. Uh-oh. There we go. So anytime you're using a mixer, I think I've said this before, you don't want to turn it from 0 all the way to 10. You want to adjust your speed slowly from 1 up to the next speed. It just helps make the engine of the motor of your machine last longer. going to mix until it's really well combined and creamed. I'm going to scrape the sides down with my spatula one time through the mixing to make sure that I'm getting the sides and the bottom. Not that much butter and sugar. Obviously, there are recipes that have a lot more content in your bowl, and so it actually kind of mixes itself as well. This way, you have to scrape the sides of the bowl down pretty well when you have small amounts of something like this in the batter, just to make sure that your paddle attachment is getting it all really, really well mixed in. I'm going to let that go just for about 30 seconds to a minute. Just let it get really nice and aerated and fluffy. If you're doing this by hand, just maybe a minute with both arms, and you're probably good to go. Do this. We're going to be adding 1 egg. It should be at room temperature. If your egg is still really cold in the fridge, it's okay. It's not going to ruin it, but it helps to make the batter more loose if your egg is not freezing cold. So I'm going to turn this off, add in my egg, and then scrape down the sides and get it going again. And then once this is all really well combined and nice and fluffy, we're going to be adding in our dry ingredients and our buttermilk alternatively. Okay. Really want to make sure that you're getting all that sugar scraped off the sides, or else it won't really well mix in and the sugar won't dissolve all the way. And if the sugar doesn't dissolve all the way now, then you're going to have like granules inside the cake, and it doesn't really, the cake then doesn't have the right kind of consistency while it bakes. So we want all of this to be really well mixed together. So I'm going to get this going again. I'm going to have to scrape that egg yolk down off the sides one time through the process, trying to make sure that it comes together. Right now it looks broken and disgusting, and like the egg is separate, and it's kind of like congealy, but after we mix it, it's going to be perfect. There's always this point in mixing batters that's like, oh God, it looks horrible, what have I done? Then you just keep going. Don't be afraid. It's going to come together nicely. We're going to add our vanilla, just a teaspoon of vanilla. Really helps define the sweetness of the cake without being an extra amount of sugar. So 1 teaspoon. Stir that in while it's mixing, but be careful. Kind of lower it in, or else it'll splash right back at you. Always fun thing when I learned how to bake as a child. Ended up with a lot of flour in my face, and when I teach children how to bake, I let them make the same mistakes I did because it's fun for them and for me. I'm going to get this up to speed, make sure that it gets really well mixed. And I have already got my dry ingredients together in a bowl. It's just 1 1/4 cup of flour. That 1 tablespoon is separate. 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon kosher salt. It's all mixed in this bowl. I've whisked it just a little gently to make sure that it's all combined. If your flour needs to be sifted, if you've got clumpy flour, definitely do that before you start adding it into this mixture, because we don't want to overmix this batter once we start adding the other things in. And so if you have lumpy flour and it doesn't get mixed in very well, you're going to end up having lumps in your whoopie pie cookie cake. So we want to make sure that it's nice and mixed together and no clumps in the flour. Okay, so this is very well mixed. Nice and fluffy, nice and aerated. I'm going to scrape down the sides just because as I add things into it, I want to make sure that I get a really cohesive mixture and nothing is spatula stuck to the paddle. You want to just make sure everything is going to incorporate once you start mixing in your dry ingredients and your buttermilk. So it's not that much buttermilk, it's only 1/4 of a cup. If you don't have buttermilk or couldn't find it at the store this week, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes. I think that they're not expecting that kind of an item to sell out. You can make your own using either 2% or whole milk and lemon juice or white vinegar, something with a high acidic content and a neutral flavor. So it's about a cup, just under a cup, like a scant cup of milk. It has to have fat in it, so like a non-fat won't work, but a 2% would. And a tablespoon of acid. So lemon juice would be better, or white vinegar. Apple cider vinegar would work. It would just taste a little bit different. But some of the other vinegars just don't have enough acid in them. So white vinegar, distilled white vinegar is the best. So you can make your own buttermilk. Just measure out a cup of milk or just under a cup of milk. Put in your tablespoon of acid, stir it up and let it sit for about 5 minutes. And you've got buttermilk. So if you couldn't find any, you can hopefully make some to make this recipe. So we're going to alternate adding in. I'm going to start with the dry mixture because there's more of that. So I'm going to do 1 batch of the dry mixture. I'm probably going to be doing this in thirds. So I just kind of want to eyeball that. About 1/3 of that mixture. Go ahead and mix that. And this is definitely when you want to start your mixer slowly, so the flour doesn't end up all over your face or all over the table. If you're doing this by hand, you do it the exact same way. You've got your nice creams together, butter, sugar, and egg, and vanilla. And then you add in maybe 1/3 of the dry mixture. Use your rubber spatula or a nice spoon to just kind of stir it together. Once that has combined, then you add a little bit of the buttermilk. Mix it till combined, then you add a little bit more of the dry, back and forth. Same concept whether you're doing it by hand or not. If you're doing it in a food processor, I would take it out now and do this process by hand. The food processor can definitely help you cream the butter and sugar together, but the rest should be done in a bowl if you're using the food processor. So I'm just going to make sure that this flour gets incorporated in. And then I'm going to add in, even on very low, about 1/3 of my buttermilk. Turn that back up, get it mixing. And then about 1/3 of the flour mixture. Just back and forth until you're done. Gently adding in each time. Trying not to over-mix it, trying to keep that nice fluffy consistency that we built up at the beginning. Just in a little bit more of this. Love the smell of buttermilk. If you're making this along with me, I hope that you're enjoying that too. It's one of my favorite kitchen smells. All right, and now the last of it. Make sure I get all of it in there. Last of the buttermilk. This is definitely a thick liquid, so you want to use your spatula to make sure that you get all of it out, because all of that counts. You definitely need all of that liquid in there. Plus, the acid in the buttermilk helps the leavening. Plus, the flavor is just really, really nice. So you want all of those components to make sure you get all of that in there. We're going to mix this together. One last time, I will scrape down the sides and the bottom of this bowl at this point and just make sure that it's really well mixed, but without over mixing it too much. So that's good from the mixer perspective. I don't want to overdo this. So I'm going to scrape down my paddle attachment, make sure I get all of that good stuff off of there. Even if there's a little bit of little bit of flour still left. Just get all of that off, and we're going to finish this with a couple of quick folds with our spatula, and then it is good to go. We are going to mix in our blueberries. So, if you are using fresh blueberries, you can mix them with the flour and the lemon zest in advance, and you can have that ready to go. I have mine ready to go. If you are using frozen blueberries, I hope you saw the note that said do not thaw. You don't want your frozen blueberries to be thawed out in advance because you will end up having purple whoopie pies. The blueberry juice will just dye the whole cake batter, and then we are left with kind of a blue-gray, purplish cake batter, and that's not what we want. We want to have a nice light color cake batter with individual blueberries in it. So if you're using frozen, you take them out now, at the very last minute when you're about ready to mix them into your batter. You then toss them with 1 tablespoon of the flour that's remaining and 2 teaspoons of lemon zest. You want to get that mixed together. If you're using fresh, it works great because you don't have to worry about the thawed juices that come out as they start to defrost. But frozen work really, really well. They add a lot of great flavor and a lot of brightness. You just don't want to thaw them in advance. So make sure they're still solidly frozen. Mix them with the flour and the lemon zest, then immediately fold them into your cake batter before they start to thaw so that you have the chance to try to keep the color from bleeding all the way through. I'm sorry, I see that there's a couple things in the chat box. I hope I answered the question about the buttermilk. That is a substitute that you can make your own. In terms of buying a substitute, not really, unless you just buy milk and acid and then make your own. Oh, good. There's some substitute answers on that website. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everybody, for helping each other. I don't know about those. Substitute for powdered sugar, I'm going to discuss. You can make your own with regular granulated sugar and cornstarch. That's basically what powdered sugar is a very, very, very fine grained refined sugar mixed with cornstarch. And so you can just make your own by mixing regular granulated sugar, 1 cup to 1 tablespoon. It's almost the same as the buttermilk. 1 cup of white sugar mixed with 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, and you've got your own powdered sugar. And that's the substitute that I know of because that's always what I've done in a professional setting. I'm sure there are other substitutes. You can also get super, super fine grain like coconut sugar, which is really nice, and I think it would work just as well in this filling situation. There's a couple different kinds of powdered sugar. Sometimes they're just called powdered sugar. Sometimes they're called confectioner sugar. It's basically the same thing. It's just the fineness of the grain of the sugar itself. So there's 10x, which is what we use mostly in professional kitchens. That means that it has been refined like 10 times. It is 10 times smaller than the normal. There's also 6x, which is pretty common. I think that's what most powdered sugar on the market might be 6x, but it's pretty much powdered sugar is confectioner sugar. I think it just might be a different ratio of cornstarch, amount of cornstarch in it. You see that I'm gently folding. To do that, you go to the bottom of the bowl and then bring it up and over. That's your folding technique. Bring it down, bring it up and over. You want to just do that very gently to incorporate the berries, especially if you're using frozen. Just enough to get them in there and mixed in, and then stop. The more you mix it, the more they thaw out, and the more you spread that juice all the way around. You want to have it end up looking like that, a really lovely, thick. It's thick. It holds together. It's not a loose, wet batter. But it's not as thick as bread dough. I can't like put that in my hand and knead it. That would be a disaster. So it's halfway in between a nice thick cake batter. Basically, it looks like our muffin batters. And we are going to now scoop that out onto our sheet pans. and get ready to bake. They only take about 10 to 12 minutes to bake, so we want to get that going so we can make our filling and then be able to actually finish a couple of these before we are done today. And I'm just going to use a spoon. You can use a scoop. You can use like an ice cream scoop or a portion control scoop. That's fantastic. We're going to make this makes 24 like small little whoopie pies. You can make them big and you can make fewer than that. I'm just going to kind of split the dough in half in the bowl. And then I'm going to split each half into about 12. So I'm just going to scoop them about yay big. It's about 2 tablespoons onto the sheet pan. Trying to make sure that I get berries in each one, but not like all the berries in this one so that there's no berries in the next one. Kind of trying to evenly distribute as you go. And again, if you make these a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, that is perfectly fine. You want to keep them about 2 inches apart. They're going to spread. They're going to keep a little bit of their height, but they are going to spread. That's how we get that nice sandwich, cookie for the sandwich. So you do want to make sure that they're not right next to each other. Okay, dividing this up. Oh, it smells so good. That lemon is so fresh, bright. Okay. This oven in this kitchen takes very small trays, so I'm going to do mine on a bunch of little trays. Hopefully you have it works best on like a half sheet tray, and then you can fit 12 on your half sheet tray, and then do a second sheet with the other 12. So that one's going to have a lot of blueberries. Might not be distributing mine perfectly evenly, and that's okay. You don't have to. You just want to keep them roughly consistent in size so that they bake at the same time. That's the only really important thing. If you have one on your tray that's very large and then one on the same tray that's very small, the small one is going to burn before the large one is done. So you just want to be kind of consistent. So if you do have a cookie scoop, that is the best way to make sure your portions are exactly the same. I'm going to spread this one out. So I'm going to start with this. I think that I just want to get these in the oven. I can always make more. Also, if you have a scoop, they're going to be a lot more perfectly round, which is nice if you want to have perfectly round whoopie pies, which I understand the visual appeal of that is very nice. So if you do want that, you kind of want to keep your mounds a little bit more concise and specific, but it doesn't, it's really, that's up to you entirely. So you want to keep it on the middle-ish of your oven, wherever the middle is. And about 10 minutes. So I don't have my normal timer here. I'm going to set my watch. I think I know how to do that. And I'll just look at the watch. So 10 minutes from now, okay. In the meantime, we're going to make our filling, which is really simple and delicious, and it translates really well into like a frosting, or you can use it for a lot of different things. I like making it as a filling for inside cakes. So lots of different ways you can use this. Pretty straightforward. To make the filling, you can use your KitchenAid mixer again. You're going to be beating the cream cheese and the butter. I've got my cream cheese and my butter pretty soft, so I'm just going to do it in a bowl so that we can all get our arm workouts today. So, make sure you can see, yeah. I am working with a quarter cup of butter, a quarter cup of cream cheese, and that powdered sugar, which you can definitely make your own. I do like some of the other kinds of sugars on the market now, but they are definitely new in terms of when I started baking. Well, I started baking 35 years ago, but when I started baking professionally 15 years ago, coconut sugar and like really nice alternative ingredients did not exist. We had to make our own gluten-free flour mixes and things like that. And so it's really, really nice that a lot of these things are more available and accessible to people, especially people who need them for their own dietary restrictions. But there's a really, really fine powdered coconut sugar that I think has been mixed with arrowroot to help it not stick together. That's almost exactly like powdered sugar, which is just cane sugar mixed with cornstarch. So they need something to keep them from sticking. That's what makes it a powdered sugar as opposed to like a granulated sugar, which is just a separate grain. So to make it more powdery, you refine it down to like almost non-existent size, and then those grains are so small they clump together, and then to keep them from clumping entirely, there's like cornstarch or arrowroot is usually added. If you don't have cornstarch, arrowroot is another alternative. You can definitely use that to make your own powdered sugar. It's the same ratio, 1 cup of sugar to 1 tablespoon of the arrowroot, and then you basically have your own homemade powdered sugar. So, quarter cup of butter, that is half of a stick. Quarter cup of cream cheese is going to be a measurement, but it probably is about 4 ounces. No, 2 ounces, which is like a quarter of one of those bricks of baking cream cheese. I tend to use the bricks of cream cheese. It doesn't matter what brand it is, but the bricks of cream cheese are better to bake with than the like tubs of spread whipped cream cheese. Definitely don't get whipped cream cheese unless the recipe specifically says to. That will change the consistency of your food and it will deflate inside of your filling and it won't be very nice. So you want to make sure that you are using at least the firm kind of cream cheese. If it comes in a tub, that's okay, but it's hard to get that super softened. It's a different kind of cream cheese slightly than this one in the bricks, and this is the way to go for baking. So I'm going to just cut my 2 ounces, but then I'm going to measure it into a measuring cup to make sure that I'm getting close to a quarter of a cup, because for solid ingredients, weight measurements are not always the same, obviously, as like liquid measurements or ounce measurements. So I don't know if that 2 ounce delineation on that foil package is 2 ounces in weight, but I'm going for 2 ounces in measurement, which might be a little bit different. So I just want to be sure. So I'm going to measure out a quarter cup of cream cheese and make sure that I've got the right amount. Measuring cups are based on, well, I think the measuring systems in baking are based on water. So like 8 fluid ounces weighs of water weighs 8 ounces in mass. But 8 fluid ounces of oil does not weigh the same in terms of like weight. So it's all based on like that stuff is based on water, and that's why there's differences. And that's why using actual measuring cups is really important. So we do know for sure that that was measured correctly. We've got our quarter cup of cream cheese mixed in with our quarter cup of butter, softened. The softer your ingredients are at this point, the easier it's going to be for you to cream them, especially if you're doing it by hand. If you're doing this in your mixer, if you cleaned out your bowl and you're going to use your mixer, that's fantastic. It'll be even easier. It's a very small amount, so you're going to have to scrape down your bowl a lot. That's okay. So we're going to beat this together until blended. I am going to use a very strong, like non-bendy silicone spoon, because then I've got really good stick It's not going to wobble around. It's not like a whisk where it's all going to get stuck. I'm just going to be able to beat this together with pretty good force. I'm trying to, oh, my apologies. Too much force. Production. Okay, so mix, mix, mix. You want to make sure that it's really, really well creamed together. You're loosening it up. You're getting it all broken down, really well combined, kind of liquefying it as much as you can. Okay, and then we're going to add in our honey lemon zest vanilla. So we're working with a tablespoon of honey. We're obviously adding sugar in terms of powdered sugar. So adding this honey is not really about the sweetness aspect, it's about the flavor. That flavor is really nice and it will help bring out the lemon. Honey and lemon go really nicely together. We're going to add that. And we need 1 teaspoon of grated lemon zest. So you want to use your microplane. If you don't have a microplane, you can use the super small holes on the side of a box grater and then just rough chop up the lemon zest. We've done some landscaping work going on right outside the door. I'm sorry if that is loud. Let me see this. Did you put them on? Yes. Yeah, I only put my cookies on 2 sheets because of space. I was using very small cookie sheets. If you have room to put yours on 1, then you can definitely put them all on 1. That's actually preferable. Whenever you're baking, it's better to have only 1 tray in the oven at a time. When you have multiple trays, then it actually affects the heat, and the one on top is going to bake differently than the one on bottom. So whenever you can have all your cookies or all your things on 1 tray, on 1 rack, in 1 spot in the oven, it's actually better that way. There are some bakeries that only bake 1 tray of cookies at a time to make sure that they're perfect. That's crazy. So we're going to do 1 teaspoon of this grated lemon zest. Just sort of eyeballing what a teaspoon looks like because I've done this a lot, but you can do this right onto your cutting board and then measure it into a teaspoon. I would say that if you're a little over a teaspoon, that's okay. Really good lemony flavor. If you don't like a lot of lemon flavor, then don't put it in at all. You probably have enough lemon flavor in the cakes to go around. But there you go. So 1 teaspoon, make sure that that's really not stuck to the sides. We're going to mix that in. We want to get our vanilla though too. So 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I can smell the cakes. What time are we at? 10 minutes. My nose. Okay. This is perfect. So what you're going for in the baking, I'll show you in this camera and that one, is a nice rise, a little bit of a spread, and it's getting golden brown around the outsides, but not all the way over the top. Okay? So we've got here golden brown around the sides, nice and puffed up, firm to the touch. It springs back when I touch it. If it was still raw batter, it would just sink in and not spring back up. So these look really, really great. I'm going to check the ones that were a little bit lower. Because like I said, the oven, because of difference when it's in the oven, and see, this one hasn't gotten as much brown around the side. So I'm just going to put this one back in towards the top of the oven where the other one was for about a minute, but we're good to go on the cake. That's what you're looking for. It should have just kind of like spread just enough to kind of settle itself down. Got a nice little rounded cookie cake with golden brown around the edges. That's what done is. If for some reason there's like a crack or a hole in it and you can see that there's still some wet batter, or you use a little toothpick to go and insert it in a thick part and there's still wet batter, then you want to make sure that that's finished through. But if it just looks a little wet because of blueberry juice, that's a different thing. That's not the same as having still wet batter. So be careful on where you stick it if you do use that method. Because if you stick it right to a blueberry, it's going to skew the results of the investigation, right? So back back to this. We got half a teaspoon of vanilla to add into our filling mixture. I want to get this done before I pull that last batch of cakes out. Okay. You're going to get these things combined really well before you add in the sugar, because once you add in the sugar, it's going to be harder to make sure that all those little flavors and things got spread out well. You want to kind of get this together, give it a little bit of air and fluffiness, and then you're going to add in the sugar. So we're dealing with 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. This is pretty traditional kind of icing or filling. Powdered sugar makes a lot of what you would find on like cakes and cookies, those kinds of frostings that you get on decorated cookies, where the frosting has been set up so it's not sticky, it's not wet to the touch, you can touch the frosting, all those beautiful decorated sugar cookies. Powdered sugar frosting, always. It's like a royal icing. And you can use it as a glue. Different ratios of sugar to butter. You can use royal icing as a glue. In fact, in most of the time that people make gingerbread houses, like professional gingerbread houses, they use royal icing and caramel as the glue. So this is an amazing thing. It can be structural, it can be delicious, it can be both. So at this point, you start slowly. You don't want to get a facial of powdered sugar by unfortunately, mixing too fast or too hard. So once it starts to incorporate into the wet batter, then you can mix it pretty quickly. Start off slow so you don't get that flashback. Same thing if you're doing it in a KitchenAid mixer. You just want to make sure that your first mixture was nice and fluffy and well beat together, and then add in your sugar and really let it go. I want to make sure that all of the lumps of powdered sugar get out. If you had extra lumpy powdered sugar like I did, then maybe sift it. If you're using your own homemade powdered sugar, then that won't happen because it's going to be nice and fresh and shouldn't have any clumps. Get that really, really, really well beat together so it's really creamy and smooth. This basically also is like Oreo filling, except way more delicious. But it's the same concept, same original ingredients, although now the Oreo filling has a lot of other stuff added into it, obviously. All right. You can smell them. This smell is like a wonderful combination of scones, if you've ever made scones, and biscuits because of the buttermilk. I mean, I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. So as long as you've got a really nice golden brown color, especially around the edges, then you're good to go. Go ahead and take them out of the oven. We're done with the oven, so I'm turning that off. It's a little bit quieter in here now. And that filling is ready to go. So all we need to do is let the cookies cool off a bit before we fill them. If we put on the filling while they're still really, really hot, then obviously it's just going to splooge out the sides. We're not going to have a really successful cookie. So I'm going to use my baking racks to cool off these items. So I'm going to remove them from the tray. Very nice and golden brown on the bottom as well. You want to make sure that you have a really good surface on the bottom. Bring you over here. Yeah, just to make sure that everything is really nice and well cooked through. If you don't have a cooling rack specifically that has holes in it, something that is perforated like a colander or something that you could maybe flip upside down to put underneath your tray just so that there's air getting to the bottom of the cookie tray, as long as you have some way to cool them down. You can put them in the refrigerator
but they might actually kind of get a little steamy on top. So it's best to let them air dry and cool off at room temperature. They won't take forever to cool off, so you can get to these pretty quickly. I think that I'll be able to show you a few of the finished ones before class is done. We still have plenty of time.
I've been checking into the chat. No new questions so far. If there's any other questions, don't hesitate.
This is the fun part.
Ooh, that's hot.
Well, the real fun part for me actually is that I'm back in a room with a dishwasher, so all of this stuff is gonna, like, I have a machine to help me, yay. But this is the real fun part. So I'm actually gonna put mine in the fridge so that we can cool them down and I can show you. It's best if you let yours cool down at room temperature, just because what's the rush, you want them to be perfect. In the meantime though, like really making sure that they are firm, because as they begin to cool down, they're going to set up even more, and you'll really be able to notice that firm texture, or if they seem underbaked at all, because you can always put them back in the oven for another couple minutes if you need to. But in the meantime, I'm going to put these in the fridge really quickly for a brief amount of time. Very briefly try to cool the bottoms off just so that I can show you, but it's really simple and straightforward. The filling and assembly of these is just making sandwiches. So you're going to fill half of them, layer it with the filling, and then sandwich another of the cookies on top. When assembling them, and I'll show you this, it's important to leave them in that position, either with one on the bottom or the top. Don't try to stand them up or lean them on the side or anything. Flat, so that one is on the bottom and one's on the top, and then set them up in the fridge for at least, I would say probably 20 minutes. If you want to serve them right away, what's going to make you be able to do that, put your filling into the fridge as well, or the freezer, depending on how fast you want to make these, just so that your filling is nice and solid, not so solid that you can't scoop it and spread it. That's the issue. You need to be really aware of like how long you leave it in the fridge, which is why the fridge is better than the freezer. The freezer would be an emergency type situation. You need your filling cooled down right away. But if you throw this in the fridge as well, it's going to be firm. It's going to be a lot more easy to spread on the cookies, and then you'll be able to eat them right away, which is fun. Sort of half the point. So just making sure that our items are coming together at this point, cleaning up the kitchen, getting some of your other ingredients put away. If you only made half of your cookies like I did, this batter you can put into your fridge in a nice tight Tupperware container or an airtight reusable bag or something, and make more tomorrow. It would not freeze very well as a raw batter. So if you want to freeze them, then you should bake them all off today. If you want to keep the batter and maybe make more tomorrow because it's just too many to deal with, then you can do that. The batter would last in your fridge overnight. Maybe a couple nights, but probably not, because the blueberries are going to start to break down and like leach out more and more of their juice over time. But I'm going to put this in a bag and I'm going to bake more either later today or tomorrow, and they're going to be fantastic. So you can take that with you. You can make a note on the recipe that there's different ways you can handle like surplus amounts of this recipe if you didn't cut it in half, but then you ended up only using some of it. So I'm going to pack mine out, make sure that I still have some to go. You don't want to waste this stuff at all. This is such a bigger room than my kitchen at home, so I'm like, can they hear me? I don't know. But I do think that this camera is better, right? It looks a lot better than my laptop. I think that it seems to be a lot less grainy from my perspective. Yeah, and it's a little bit more of a wide shot. You can get a lot more of the room this way. I just keep yelling for that imaginary production crew, but that's me. So I I'm glad that this is working. This camera I got wasn't working for a long time because my laptop is, old. It's like a year and a half old, so I had to download all kinds of things, but now it's working. And I think I'm gonna get my other laptop working with the camera so I can have 3 cameras. So get ready for next week, guys. It's gonna be really exciting. Actually, don't get ready for next week. We're making angel food cake with berries and whipped cream. Oh my goodness. One of my favorite summer desserts, just light and refreshing. One of the best things to sit outside in the sun and treat yourself and your family to after a long day. And it's a really fun technique to learn how to work with egg whites beat into a meringue especially. And that's going to lead us then into our final recipe. In our last week, we're going to be making, I think I've described them to some of you, our Pavlova recipe, which is a egg white based meringue filled with lemon curd and berries, and it's just going to be delightful for the next couple of weeks. So get ready for that. Look out for the recipe, obviously coming at the end of this week, but if anyone has any questions before they get that, just let me know. So I've got at least 4 more whoopie pies here, probably like 6, so I can make 3 more cakes, and that's a nice treat I can make for myself or friends probably tomorrow. If anyone has any comments or suggestions about the technology or about the format or about things that they would like to see close-ups of or anything that you think could help us in this project as we move forward with more virtual programming, then please let us know. What do you do with the filling? Yeah, put it in the fridge until the cookies are cool. Yes. It's going to help you then spread it onto the cookies a little bit more firmly, and then you're not going to have as loose of a filling, and then you'll be ready to eat them faster. Especially since we're dealing with maybe slightly warm cookies because we're all hurrying along, or at least I am very impatient in this process. So we are going to, that's why the fridge is helpful. And so if you want to finish them at the same pace than I am, then the fridge is going to be your friend for this. We still have about 12 more minutes of class, so I'm not going to rush mine because I don't want to have melted filling. I don't want to ruin this whole process that we started. So I'm going to wait until about 5 more minutes until I start filling mine. But yeah, Karen, I hope you heard that. You definitely put it all into the fridge. Okay. If you have questions, great. If you need to do dishes, I understand. I understand the pain. If you have leftover cream cheese, I recommend making a salsa dip. Really fantastic snack later on, especially if you make some homemade whole wheat pita chips. Recipe is on our website. We made that in our weekly meal prep class on Monday. It was really wonderful, kind of Mediterranean spread yesterday. That was yesterday. Monday was just yesterday. And it was, I haven't made homemade hummus in about 6 months, so that was a treat. It was really, that's all I'm eating this week. I'm really excited about it. So those recipes are on our website as well, even if you aren't signed up for those classes, which you can always sign up. We're still taking people. But we put the recipes on the recipe catalog, so you can find baking recipes, you can find our meal prep recipes, you can find kids cooking recipes, you can find most of the recipes we made throughout the spring quarter. They're all now on our website. So there's other fun things you want to try or other things that you didn't get a chance to try earlier in the year. You can find almost all of them there. And then most of our recordings are uploaded and continue to be uploaded. I do actually have somewhat of a production crew, and he's the most awesome person. I wouldn't be able to do any of this without him, so he's diligently uploading them, when he can. So keep an eye out for the videos, but if you want to try recipes, the recipes are there, and then if you have questions on them, I am here. So I'm going to check the status of my cookies. I'm out of camera range over here. I'm going to check the status of my cookies in the fridge just to kind of see how we're doing so we can get this show on the road. Yeah. Basically, all you're looking for is that the underside, where you want to put that filling, is not hot anymore, because then you know it's not going to melt your filling. So I am good to go. Didn't take more than about 5 minutes in the fridge. So we've got our Whoopie pie cookie cakes. I don't know what the technical term for that is. And we've got our frosting. So you can use a spoon, you can use a butter knife, you can use a cake spatula if you happen to have one of those. That's awesome. One of those, you know, it's flat on one side and then the handle goes up here. Great for like edges and making things. I'm just going to use a spoon. Where did I put my spoons? I'm going to use the butter knife because that's what's right here. I want to make sure that I get my filling all the way straight down the sides of the bowl so that it's kind of all in one big gloopy pile in the center. Just because then I know that all the flavor and all the lemon and all the sugar is all in one spot. So then, you see in this camera, yeah. I'm gonna just, because I will lose count along the way. I don't know why, I'm a fairly smart person, but I just tend to get unfocused. I'm going to flip over the 6 that I'm going to use as the bottom, and I'm not going to flip over the tops because then I would end up putting filling on all of them, and well, I guess I would just have extra filling, and that's not so bad, but you want to kind of remember what you're doing. So I still want to have some extra filling for the cookies that I didn't make. This filling is for the full batch. So you just spread it out. It's about a tablespoon per whoopie pie. I think that's what I put. I didn't even say, should be about a tablespoon, maybe a dollop more, but you just really want to make sure that you've got enough in that bowl for 24. If you made for 12 bottoms to make the full batch, right? Which that's plenty for one whoopie pie. If you have too much filling inside, it's just going to all squeeze out when you eat it. These can be kind of messy to eat anyway. That's why they're fun. That's why kids like them. But the more you leave them in the fridge to set up, once you've built them, then the more likely it is they're going to have a nice firmer texture. And so when you bite into it, it won't be a complete disaster down the front of your shirt. But that's why we eat these outside. Or, you know, with a napkin. Making sure that it's spread nice and evenly all the way across. But I'm not pressing down, I'm just kind of dolloping it on and then spreading it out. I don't want to press down into the cake, and I don't really want to pop any of those blueberries to start bleeding into the filling. I know blueberry juice is really beautiful to look at in this form, like as a whole blueberry. But if it bursts and mixes into your cake batter, it is the weirdest color of like gray purple that I can't even describe. I guess like mauve, is that a color? It's like oh, it's just it's not pretty. It's a really ugly color. So you don't want your food to end up looking that way. I remember having that issue when I first started baking scones. And so when you want to make fresh berry scones, you freeze your berries in advance, pop them in the freezer for about half an hour, and then it'll help the process. But especially using frozen berries, boy, just don't thaw them until you absolutely have to. Okay, so I've got mine done, and plenty of filling more for 6 more because I only made half the batch. So we didn't make these cookies exactly the same size and shape, right? Mine are a little rustic, a little artisan, and that's cool. So I'm going to try to match up the most common size and shape so that they actually do fit together. This big one and this big one are going to go together. This one and this one. Just kind of try to make them the same-ish so that you don't have a teeny tiny cookie on the top and a big cookie on the bottom, which will, again, cause a lot of splooging of the filling. You want to make sure that they're nice and neat. So these are going to set up in the refrigerator, but we have got our delicious blueberry and lemon whoopie pies. This is an exceptional treat. Definitely a good single serving for a dessert. And then run around the block a few times afterwards so that the kids can go to bed later on. But there we go. These are really, I'm not just like saying this, one of my favorite summer treats because it has two of those wonderful, fresh, amazing summer flavors of the lemon and the blueberry. And it's cold when you keep them in the fridge, so then when you eat it, it's this really nice, like cold, refreshing dessert. And you can get them done in advance and then have them later in the day so that your oven is not on when it's super, super hot in the evening, you know, around dinner time. So if there are any other questions about these, please let me know, type it in or go ahead and unmute yourself. We're right here towards the end. But I'll give you a close up of our treasures. I cannot wait to eat these, you guys. And I really hope that you enjoy eating them. I hope you enjoy making them, most importantly. This is a fun recipe. There's a lot of good techniques that we've already learned and now you can master in terms of your creaming mixing method, mixing things alternatively, making fillings by hand. All of these are really, really good baking techniques. You guys are, you could get a job. Like, those are the basic skills that you need to go work in a bakery. If you're looking for a change in your life, talk to me. This is already my 4th career. So, there we go. It's been a joy to have you here today. It's been a pleasure to be back in the kitchen. I hope that the technology and the sound and all of that has been tolerable. Oh, good. I'm excited for you all to make them. If you didn't make them today, I'm really looking forward to hearing how they turn out. Please, as usual, send me pictures. I was just a proud mother hen last week when I saw all of everybody's upside down cakes. It was really wonderful. So thank you for sharing. And thank you for helping answer some of those questions. I didn't know about that website reference for the alternatives to buttermilk. So that's really helpful. Thank you for that. And I get to learn something new every day, even this far into my career. So yeah, I think that is it for today. If there's anything else, I'm not going to kick you out. Otherwise, we will see you next week or tomorrow in Kids Cooking. I hope you're there. We're going to be making turkey patty melts. I'm going to be teaching your kids how to caramelize onions and make the most delicious barbecue dinner. So you're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a really great Tuesday, everybody.